Hey YouTube, it's ICU and welcome to the 81st episode of Best Tech Info and Rumors. Now, to preface this episode, I just wanted to say that I'm actually really going to be focusing on the iOS 5.1 Untethered Jailbreak and explaining things about that. And for the rest of the news, I kind of just wanted to keep things short. So let me know what you guys think about this new style of doing things down below in the comment section if you like it, or if you guys want me to go more into depth on the different stories. Now, again, first up, I'm going to be talking about the iOS 5.1 Untethered Jailbreak status. And in order to talk about that, I actually need to preface a couple of things, and that's basically just explaining what a tethered jailbreak is and what an untethered jailbreak is, and the two types of exploits that are used in the two different jailbreaks. So if you guys already know about tethered jailbreaks, untethered jailbreaks, Bootrom exploits, and userland exploits, you can just click the annotation that's on the screen now to skip ahead to the actual status update. So I'm going to start out by explaining what a tethered jailbreak is. So essentially, if you have a tethered jailbreak, basically what that means is you have to actually plug your iOS device into your computer and rerun the jailbreak program or a specific part of the program to actually boot into your device and be able to fully use all of its functionalities. So take, for instance, the latest iOS 5.1 tethered jailbreak. It works for only the iPhone 4, iPhone 3GS, iPod Touch 4th and 3rd generation, as well as the first iPad, and I'll explain why that is in a second. But basically, if you're jailbroken with Red Snow on iOS 5.1 with one of those devices, say maybe it just dies and you have to reboot it, then what you're going to have to do is plug it into your computer and run Red Snow's just boot mode to actually get it to boot up, and be able to fully use it. Now, the type of exploit that a tethered jailbreak relies on is a Bootrom exploit. Now, while tethered jailbreaks can be a pain, Bootrom exploits are instrumental in the jailbreak community. And the reason why is because in order to actually patch a Bootrom exploit, Apple has to release new hardware with an updated Bootrom so that that Bootrom exploit is patched and it cannot be used on future devices. And essentially, that's the reason why the current tethered jailbreak only works for the older devices, because the latest Bootrom exploit has actually been used for a while now. It's referred to as the Lime Rain exploit, and it was discovered by GeoHot, and it only works on the A4 based devices, which should include the iPhone 4, the iPod Touch 4th generation, and the original iPad. So it doesn't work on the two A5 based devices, which should include the iPhone 4S and the iPad 2, or the new A5X based iPad. So if you want a tethered jailbreak for the newer iDevices, the dev team will have to find a new Bootrom exploit. And as they've stated numerous times, that's actually much harder than finding a userland exploit, which is required for an untethered jailbreak, and I'll talk about that right now. So if you didn't know, an untethered jailbreak basically means that you do not have to plug your jailbroken iOS device into your computer every time you need to reboot it. All you have to do is jailbreak it and you're basically good to go, so long as you do not update to a newer firmware, because obviously that will cause you to lose your jailbreak, which, unlike a Bootrom exploit, it's actually a software exploit, so Apple can easily patch it with the release of a newer firmware. But despite the fact that userland exploits are easily patchable, they're definitely more popular among jailbreakers because, again, they allow for an untethered jailbreak and you don't actually have to mess with something like Red Snow every time you need to reboot your iDevice. So with all of that out of the way, the status update is basically just two tweets from Pod2G, who is a member that was instrumental in the iOS 5.0.1 untethered jailbreak, and basically he said that there isn't an untethered jailbreak out now. He has no clue when they're going to release the untethered jailbreak, but he is devoting some hours per week to actually finding vulnerabilities for the iOS 5.1 untethered jailbreak. And he also said that while they have pieces of the userland jailbreak, they definitely don't have all of it, and even if they did have all of it, we'd still be weeks away from a public release. So while that's definitely unfortunate, it just means that if you want a untethered jailbreak, you have to remain on iOS 5.0.1. Do not update to 5.1, especially if you're on an iPhone 4S or an iPad 2, because you cannot jailbreak iOS 5.1, not even with a tethered jailbreak, as I just mentioned. And obviously there is not a jailbreak for the newest 3rd generation A5X based iPad yet, and hopefully once Pod2G and the other iPhone dev teams actually complete an untethered jailbreak for iOS 5.1, that will actually include the new 3rd generation iPad. Now, next up, I wanted to talk about something that I actually did not report on my website, but I just get so many questions about this, and I just wanted to address it and give you guys some more information on it. So I get asked about the next generation iPod Touch and when Apple is going to release the next generation iPod Touch with major updates, because I'm sure, as all of you know, even though Apple technically did refresh the iPod Touch recently, they didn't actually add anything that warrants an upgrade from the 4th generation iPod Touch. So basically, as of now, there's really no information on whether or not Apple will release an updated iPod Touch in the near future, because if things continue to go the way they're going right now, then iPhones and iPads will take priority over the iPod Touch. And that makes sense because those are Apple's two most popular devices, because as the iPhone, iPad have been growing more popular, the iPods have kind of been dying off. Now, while that doesn't necessarily include the iPod Touch, because it's kind of like a hybrid iPod and iPhone, it just depends on where Apple's priorities are. Again, as of now, there's really no information as to when they will release a fully upgraded iPod Touch. However, it would definitely make sense for them to update it because there is still a market for the iPod Touch. Next up, iHateSnow, a developer behind a couple of popular tools, one of which being Snowbreeze, actually revealed that he has a new method for downgrading. For those of you that don't know, previously with iOS 4 and some of the older iDevices, you could easily downgrade from a higher firmware if you had your SSH files saved, and you could essentially trick Apple's servers into thinking that they were still signing that older firmware, so you could downgrade from a higher firmware to a lower firmware. Well, now with the newer devices and iOS 5, things have changed and the way Apple signs firmwares is different, and that basically makes the old method of downgrading obsolete. Well, iHateSnow tweeted out the other day that he found an APT ticket loophole that will essentially allow for downgrading on the two A5 based devices, which again would include the iPhone 4S and the iPad 2, and also the newest A5X based iPad. However, because iOS 5.1 is the only firmware available for the new iPad right now, this will basically apply in the future when more firmwares are released for the new iPad, so that way it could possibly downgrade to a lower firmware such as iOS 5.1. And unfortunately, iHateSnow hasn't released any information as to if or when he will actually release a utility that utilizes this APT ticket loophole. But as always, just be sure to stay tuned to Best Tech Info and right here on my YouTube channel for more updates and information on iHateSnow's latest downgrade method, the iOS 5.1 Untethered Jailbreak status, and any information about whether or not and when Apple will actually release a new fully updated iPod Touch. Now for the rest of the stories, a recent test reveals that the new Verizon 4G LTE iPad can actually use its personal hotspot feature with an active connection for up to 25.3 hours. However, in that time span, if you were actually supporting an active connection, you could possibly use up to 111 gigabytes worth of data, and maybe even more than that. Again, it just depends on what type of speeds you're getting and whether or not your connection is always active. So obviously that definitely burns through your data, and the highest data plan that Verizon offers for the newest iPad is 10 gigabytes. So you will certainly blow through it if you use your iPad as a personal hotspot for that 25.3 hour period with an active connection. So while it might not be practical to use the personal hotspot feature on the new iPad for an extended period of time, you can rest assured knowing that you will not run out of charge anytime soon. Also, Australian officials are targeting Apple for false claims of 4G speeds on the new iPad, because due to the nature of the hardware that's used in the new 3rd generation iPad, 4G LTE capabilities are only available inside the United States on Verizon and AT&T. Moving on, for those of you that didn't know, Siri was actually an application that was released to the App Store in 2010, and just a few weeks after it was released, the co-founder of Siri was actually contacted by Steve Jobs himself, and the rest was history. Apple ended up purchasing the company, the ideas, and the software behind the ideas to actually make everything work. And as all of you know, Siri is now deeply integrated into the iPhone 4S, and hopefully it will also be integrated into future iOS devices. So that story was definitely interesting. The co-founder of Siri actually spoke at a keynote presentation in Chicago, and I highly recommend checking out that article. Finally, a new study suggests that iOS is the only mobile operating system that's growing right now. Android is remaining the same, and all other mobile operating systems are starting to die off. And with Apple's iOS domination and Google's Android domination, they're starting to push all of the other mobile operating systems to the brink of extinction. Now, this is definitely not good, and basically for one reason: competition. If there isn't as much competition, then companies like Apple and like Google will not be pushed hard enough to actually come up with new innovative features for their mobile devices and for the mobile operating systems that actually run their mobile devices. So while I'm definitely an iOS fan and I prefer it over Android and all of the other mobile operating systems, I still hope that they continue to stay around for the sole purpose of the evolution of iOS. Unfortunately, Google will definitely have to step up their game, because I'm afraid due to the severe fragmentation of Android, it will slowly start to die off with all of the other operating systems. Again, unless they start doing something major and they flip this around. So with that said, I'm going to bring back the question of the day again, starting with this episode. So what do you guys think about Apple's iOS domination in the mobile operating system arena? Let me know down below in the comments section, and don't forget to rate this video up if you liked it. Hit that subscribe button to be notified every time I release a new video. And if you guys want to be updated more often, just be sure to like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, and add me to one of your circles inside of Google+. And until next time, this is ICU signing out.